we are now switching on to the time of Abraham. And so if you want to prepare yourself in your Bible to Genesis 12, that's where we're going to be starting. And we're going to bounce around a little bit in Genesis. But we have come from the time of creation. We saw God created things. He created things on purpose and for purpose. He created them and they were all good, and it was very good when he was done. But we see that he also created us. And the moment he gave us a command, we broke it. And once we broke that command, we became hurt people. And we began hurting people, as hurt people often do. And we started snowballing sin, and what happened with the creation is first we are out of our relationship and put a wedge between us and God. Then we started putting wedges between us and other people. We saw Cain and Abel, Noah. We see the Tower of Babel. And this time we'll cover Abraham. We'll cover his son, Isaac. We will go Abraham, Isaac. We'll go all the way down through Joseph. And we'll also, this time, Job somewhere fits in there during this time period. And that is kind of where we are today as we reach the point where God starts revealing and stating out loud what exactly his rescue plan is to redeem us and to make this all right. And as I was studying this week and putting in a lot of time and just reading, and as I read it last week and as I went through it, I started to realize something. We have a problem. We have a problem. And I think it's almost all of us that have this problem. It's our society that has this problem. It's our world that has this problem. We have a problem of joy. We don't seem to want joy in our world. We put joy and cynicism up against each other, and oftentimes cynicism wins. I actually saw it this week. My son, we lived in China as my kids were growing up. They're still growing up. They're 5, 7, 9. And we grew up over there. We were over there, and so we didn't really watch a lot of sports. And then we came back during COVID, and they were doing so much virtual learning. We didn't watch a lot of things, but this year we've been starting to watch sports. And my middle son, Oliver, who's 7, he has chosen a second favorite football team. Luckily for me, he still says the Bears are his favorite team. I don't believe him, but he says the Bears are still his favorite team, my team. But he has decided to root for a team that you all would know as formerly the St. Louis Rams. He is rooting for the Los Angeles Rams. He has chosen this team out of nowhere. Not at the end of the season. He started just looking at them and starting to study them and learn all about their history. He checked out a book from the library and read about the Rams. He's been getting really into it. He starts asking me questions about their past with Kurt Warner, and do you know who's setting this record and this record? He knows all the players, everything about them. He tells me every single score, every stat he can find. He is on fire all of a sudden for the Rams, for the Los Angeles Rams. So this last weekend, the Rams were in the playoffs. And we turn on the TV to watch the game. And they're playing a rival of theirs, Cardinals team, another team Missourians are very familiar with from the past. And they're starting to play, and the Rams score a touchdown at the beginning. And we're like, yeah, good job, because I'm rooting for him, My son likes him, so I'm rooting for him. And he sits there, stone-faced. It's like, Oliver, your team just scored. Aren't you excited? Yeah. Okay. Odd. And then the second touchdown comes, and the Rams are starting to put it on the Cardinals, and a game that it's obviously that they're winning big. And it's like, Oliver, touchdown, yeah! And he's like, yes. What is that, Oliver? Like, your team is winning here. What's going on? And I see Oliver's issue is a lot the same as our issue, and Brene Brown speaks a lot to this. We are scared to have joy because joy is a vulnerable place. When you allow yourself to fully be excited and on fire for something, you are vulnerable to pain of losing that. You are vulnerable to disappointment. You're vulnerable to loss. And so a lot of us are like my son Oliver. We see that our team is scoring and winning, but we don't want to get too excited. We've seen the world. We've seen the world. You know, you can churn on the news and you can see real quick, joy doesn't sell. I tried to count up the number of articles when I went to Fox News and CNN and scrolled through, and I tried to count up the number of article titles until I could find one that was a positive, joyful story. I don't have that many fingers and toes. I couldn't find one. And so as I'm going through, I'm like, horrible, 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 horrible. And all these things were things people had hope would be good, but they didn't turn out that way. Or they're not turning out that way. And we see this over and over, this pattern of us getting built up and wanting something, but that something doesn't last. We think joy is so fleeting. We know it can be a moment and it can be gone. We know the pain of a pregnancy that is lost. We know the pain of really good friends who turn their back on us or we turn our back on them. We know the pain of broken marriages. Either we observed it from our parents or our family or have experienced it ourselves. We know the pain of getting excited about something and having real joy, and then it's gone. Everything we hoped for and wanted, gone. We know that pain. We see that pain. And there's something actually real about that, about the cynicism. You see, cynics actually start hitting their stride around the age 44 is when we start really getting cynical, they say. When we turn a corner in our lives and we start getting cynical. And this cynicism builds with experience. It's a reality. Psychologists have done studies on who best knows what's going on in the world, that has a reality about themselves and the world around them. And did you know the people who have the best grasp of reality are people with mild cases of depression? How sad is that? The people who see the world the best are people with mild cases, not major cases of depression, but mild cases of depression, actually are seeing the world more as it actually is. And so there seems to be a reason that the skeptics win. That cynicism takes over in our hearts. There seems to be valid evidence for why we don't allow ourselves to have moments of joy, a life of joy. Because the world is painful and people aren't nice. And when we look in the mirror, we even know it's more true than when we look at others. We know how we hurt people in our hearts. We know how we make promises that we let people down. We know. We have the scars to prove it. And our cynicism grows. And that's the end of my sermon, right? I'm just going to walk away, leave you in that. No, it's not. Because what we're going to be stepping into today is God's promises. Because us as Christians, we know there's more to reality than what a lot of people see. And we're going to read about that. And so it starts here in Genesis. Abraham has come onto the scene in Genesis 12. He's from a land of Ur, and he has built up actually a pretty nice foundation of a life. And then God shows up and everything goes crazy. The Lord said to Abraham, starting in verse 1, chapter 12, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you," this is where the covenant comes in, guys. The covenant in Covenant Presbyterian, we have an old covenant, a new covenant, Old Testament, New Testament. This is the old covenant. Here it is. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the people on the earth will be blessed through you. What a promise. I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing. He's being blessed to be a blessing. The world's going to be blessed through Abraham. It's a great promise. So Abraham left, as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him, his nephew. And Abraham was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. 75, when God says to him, I'm going to make you great. A lot of us think we're retired by 75, like our time for greatness has passed. A lot of people can witness to that in this room. 70, it's nice. 75, right? Now God promises he'll be, it's like I could have used this blessing, a few years ago. But okay, God has done it. So now Abraham gets up and leaves. He's 75. He took his wife, Sarai, which I'm just going to say Sarah. Their names changed from Abram to Abraham. We'll get into in a second. And Sarai to Sarah. His nephew Lot and all his possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. And they arrived there. Abraham traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Morah at Shechem. At the time the Canaanites were in the land, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Now when he says offspring, you could probably see a footnote in your Bible that word also means seed. It's a singular thing, and I'm going to give this to your seed, this land, the people who come from you. What's the problem?
It's not him.
What was that?
It's not him.
It's not him, yeah. But what else is the problem? Abraham doesn't have a kid yet. Abraham is told, this land will be given to you. I'm giving you a promise. And Abraham doesn't question the promise. He takes joy in it. He gets up and goes. And actually, Sarah might have even more to applaud her for. She didn't even hear from God, and she listened to her husband and followed. Could you imagine husband saying, hey, God said we're going to move. And your wife goes, oh, where? And you say, I don't know. Okay. Did he tell you anything else? Oh, yeah, our offspring. We're going to have kids, and they're going to own all this land. Really? Yep. Well, I'm 65 and you're 75. Okay. I imagine Sarah hearing this. And I hope she had joy, but I can hear the cynicism already. Even before she's even mentioned, I would be cynical. God, I was 20 and married, maybe she got married in her teens or 20s, and she watched her friends and neighbors and cousins have babies. And she was like, ooh, maybe I'm going to have a baby this year. Or maybe next year. And then 30 happened. Okay, God, friends are still having kids. And 35 and 40. Okay, some people are still having kids. And 50 rolls around. And 60. And then 65 rolls around and God shows up and says, you're going to have descendants who take this land. Okay, going to trust you, God. And she trusted him probably with a hope that was like a lot of our hopes. We want something good, but we don't expect it. That's how I would be in her situation. So they go on, and we're going to skip ahead a few chapters to 15. 15 verse 1. After this, which if you want to know what this is, there's a lot of drama that happens in between these chapters. It's kind of like a soap opera. If you're ever into soap operas, you can read what happens in between these chapters, 13 and 14 on your own, but right here in 15. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your great reward. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Cynicism. Skeptical. Lord, I'm practical here. I love you. I'm following you. But God, there's a problem with your promise. You haven't given me a kid. And you can see how the skepticism played out with Sarah and Abraham before this. One of those stories you'd read is that as soon as they left Ur and went to other lands and they went around, that Abraham put up his wife to sleep with the Egyptian Pharaoh to save themselves, because they didn't think that maybe God would actually keep his promise, that they'd be a great nation. They needed to protect that promise at all times. And so he said, oh, something might happen to me. Here's my wife. And then we see it again here. God, I trust you. You say it again, but I don't have a kid. Verse 4, then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. God took him outside and said, look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. The Lord takes him out and says, look up at the stars. You're once going to at one point have all of these descendants. You're going to have all of these descendants. Do you know there's more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand on every beach in the entire world? You're going to have an incalculable number of kids. You are going to have this line come from you. But God didn't tell him today he would. He just said that you would. God also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land and take possession of it. So far, God has promised him that he will have kids and descendants, that he will have land and nations, that kings will come from him, and that God will be with him. His presence will be there. But Abraham said to him, O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer and a goat and a ram, 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And what happens is they end up cutting these up. And they put them on two different sides. Because the terminology when someone makes a covenant with somebody in the Bible is actually they cut a covenant with them. You cut up these animals and then you walk amongst them. And what you're saying is, if we don't fulfill our word, let us be like these animals. We are cutting a covenant. Let us be destroyed like this. And so Abraham cuts these and puts them out, and then he goes into a sleep and sees a vision. And normally a covenant, you and the other person making that covenant, you would walk between them. But in his vision, it's not Abraham and God. It's God alone, walking amongst them. God is saying, I guarantee this. And if there's something that breaks this covenant, it's on me that I will pay the price. Which we see in Jesus, don't we? But I am the guarantor of this covenant. I am the one. And God gives him this covenant and says that to him. But we fast forward again. We're going to go all the way to chapter 18. And at this point, more years have passed. God has said, I've give you a kid. It hasn't happened. And then they get 3 visitors, 3 angels come to him and Sarah. And it says there, the Lord appeared to Abraham near the great tree. Abraham looked up and saw the 3 men standing by, and when he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of the tent to meet them and bow down low to the ground. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and we will all wash your feet. Rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat. Very well, they answered. Do as you say. So Abraham hurried quick, and he got everything ready to prepare a place for his visitors. Then he got the food, and he got it all ready. And then the visitors in verse 9 say, Where is your wife Sarah? They asked him. There in the tent, he said. Then the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. At this point, Abraham's 99. Sarah, around 89. You will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, being a little nosy, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years. See, they weren't dumb. They knew babies don't come from 90-year-olds. And Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year. Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied. I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. See, Sarah has been trying to be faithful to this too. She's like, maybe God meant from you, Abraham, and not me. And so she gave her servant to Abraham, and they had a child, and God said, it's not that one. It's going to be a child with you and Sarah. God wanted this child to be supernatural, so nobody could say that it was just a natural thing happen. So he let them get aged in years. He let them get older and hear this. And as they went, they wanted to believe, but they weren't stupid. They weren't dumb. They knew they were old. They knew that most likely their time had passed and it would take something supernatural. So they tried to make God's promises happen for themselves. They deceived and lied. They made a baby with a servant. But God said, no, I'm going to do something different. And this is where our faith comes in as Christians. See, the rest of the world is right. This world is tough. But we believe in a God who keeps his promises. And Abraham and Sarah, we can look back with a skeptical eye at them and be like, oh, shouldn't you have believed? Didn't you see what God was doing? He protected you there, and he protected you here. Couldn't you just listen to God? And when we look back, we can say that. But imagine sitting there for 25 years being told by God you're going to have a baby. And you're already 65 at the beginning of that. And we know that God keeps his promises. We know that we have seen this. But we still forget it over and over that Jesus died for us, that he came and he saved for us. That's why Paul in Philippians, from the verse that Mary read earlier, did you remember what he said there in Philippians chapter 4? It's right there in your bulletin. You can look. You can cheat. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say it. Rejoice. Notice the exclamation point, the emphatic way he says this. As Christians, we sometimes have to be reminded, rejoice. Don't you know the world doesn't win? Yes, there's sin in the world. I know it. I watched it. I have a plan. I have come and died for it. And no, I haven't eliminated it from everywhere, but you know if you followed me that I have regenerated your heart and soul and mind. I have given you a hope and a future because you follow me. So while the rest of the world knows that joy is fleeting, we know that pain is fleeting. We know that the suffering of this world is fleeting and not long for it. We know death does not win. The rest of the world sees a partial story and they can't see that end. We're not supposed to be that, church. We're not supposed to be those skeptics who don't allow ourselves to have moments of joy. We are allowed to drive by sunrises and smile and have that joy because we're not afraid that, oh yeah, the sunrise is going to go away. We know that. We know something better is coming too. So we can have this joy in that moment. We can have joy of new friendships that we give ourselves to our friends. We can have the joy of serving others because we know it's going to be hard and we know that they're going to squander that. But guess what? God is coming for them too, and we know there's good in this world. We know our God. And our God can do all things. And our God is all good. And our God chooses us when we couldn't choose him. God keeps his promises to Abraham. And more specifically, he actually keeps his promises to Abraham through Jesus. It's through Jesus and through himself that God keeps these supernatural promises. My question to you right now is, are you a person marked by joy? Do you live these promises out? Do people come to you when there's good things because they know you'll be excited because you have a joy? And you know the thing that's fleeting is the pain, and you just want to sit in the good with people? Are you that person that in our movies we act like only ignorant people and stupid people are happy all the time, have smiles on their faces, but you know that there's something more? And you're not ignorant or stupid. You know that the world is messed up, but you have a great God that has overcome the world. Now, to conclude today, I want you to flip to Genesis chapter 20. Chapter 21. And then we find Sarah at the ripe old age of 90. Her husband is 100 now. It says, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. God keeps his promises. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. God did it at his time, not ours. Abraham gave the name Isaac, and the son Sarah to the son Sarah bore to him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, which was the sign of the covenant, as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Now this is one of my favorite parts of this. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about it will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne a son in my old age. The name Isaac means he laughs. We know the end of the story. We get hindsight already. We can have joy in the midst of pain. We can have joy when we lose our loved ones. We can have joy when our kids don't listen. We can have joy when our parents are being difficult. We can have joy where we can thank people who are intolerant of us because now we learned how important tolerance is. We can have joy in learning what pain is from other people because we don't want to hurt them that way. We can have joy in these moments because we know the end, and we also know the beginning. We have a relationship with a God who keeps his promises, a God who loves us and will always fight for us. God, thank you so much. Thank you so much that you keep your promises and do the impossible. You heal our hearts when there's nothing we can do to heal them. You fix our relationships when there's nothing we can do to fix them. You use our pain when we see no way of redeeming it. And you have made a way back to you through your Son when we had screwed things up so bad that there was nothing we could do to fix that relationship. God, thank you for making your promises. Thank you for guaranteeing those promises. And as we go forth this day, help us to remember the joy found only in knowing you. The joy found in knowing you. Remind us to rejoice always. It's in your name I pray. Amen.